Zexkari stood before the great council chamber and felt his crystalline body shake with fear. The tall alien looked at the faces of 100 different species, all waiting to hear his words. His voice came out broken and scared as he began to speak about the humans and what they had done to his people. The Veltar had ruled space for 300 years. They were tall, strong, and their ships could destroy planets. Every species they met either joined them or died. Zexkari had been a commander in their mighty fleet, proud and sure of his power. That was before they found Earth. It started in the year 2387 when their scout ships found a small blue planet near the edge of the galaxy. The beings there called themselves humans. They looked weak and soft. Their technology was simple. They had barely left their own star system. The Veltar leaders laughed when they saw the reports. These humans would make good slaves. Zexkari remembered the day they sent the first fleet to Earth. He commanded 3 mighty warships, each one bigger than a human city. The plan was simple. Show up, demand surrender, take the humans as slaves. It should have taken one day. The first human ship they met was small and ugly. It was called New Horizon, and it carried only 20 crew members. Captain Jake Morrison was their leader. He looked young and scared when his face appeared on their communication screen. Zexkari smiled, thinking this would be easy. Morrison spoke in a calm voice even though 3 giant alien ships surrounded his tiny vessel. He said he wanted to talk. The Veltar demanded immediate surrender. All humans must bow down or die. Morrison nodded and said he understood. Then he started asking questions. He wanted to know about Veltar technology. How did their ships move so fast? What made their weapons so strong? How many ships were in their fleet? Zexkari answered some questions, thinking the human was just curious like a child. The Veltar had always enjoyed showing off their power, but Morrison kept asking more questions. He wanted to know about their battle tactics. How did they attack planets? What was their command structure? Where did they get their resources? Zexkari began to feel uncomfortable but still answered. He thought the human was trying to understand how hopeless his situation was. Hours passed as Morrison asked question after question. His crew worked quietly in the background, their fingers moving over strange control panels. Zexkari noticed they were recording everything but did not think it was important. What could these primitive beings do with Veltar military secrets? Then Morrison made a request that surprised everyone. He asked if they could see inside a Veltar ship. He said humans were naturally curious and would surrender more easily if they understood Veltar power. Zexkari agreed, thinking it would break the human spirit completely. The human captain came aboard with 3 of his crew members. They walked through the mighty ship with wide eyes, asking more questions about every system they saw. They touched nothing but looked at everything. One human named Ben Rodriguez kept making notes on a small device. Another called Lisa Carter asked about the ship's power source. After the tour, Morrison thanked them politely. He said humans would need time to discuss surrender terms with their government. Could they have 3 days? Zexkari agreed, feeling generous. What harm could 3 days do? The human ship moved away slowly, heading back toward Earth. Zexkari's ships followed at a distance. Everything seemed normal. The humans were going home to surrender. The Veltar had won another easy victory. But on the second day, something strange happened. Human ships began appearing near Jupiter. Not just 1 or 2, but dozens of them. They looked different from anything the Veltar had seen before. Some were clearly military vessels, but others seemed to be mining ships and cargo haulers that had been changed somehow. Morrison's voice came over the communication system again. He thanked the Veltar for the education about their technology. Then he said something that made Zexkari's blood run cold. The humans would not surrender. Instead, they wanted to test their new understanding of Veltar systems. The first attack came from 3 directions at once. Human ships that should have been slow and clumsy moved like fighters. They used weapons that seemed based on Veltar designs but somehow worked better. Morrison's own ship, which had looked so weak before, now carried guns that could punch through Veltar shields. Zexkari ordered his ships to attack. Sure, their superior technology would end this quickly, but the humans fought in ways he had never seen before. They worked together perfectly, each ship knowing exactly what the others were doing. When one ship was damaged, 2 others would cover it. When the Veltar tried to surround them, the humans would scatter and reform somewhere else. The battle near Jupiter's moons lasted 6 hours. 3 Veltar fighter ships were destroyed. The humans lost 2 vessels, but their crews escaped in small pods. As Zexakari's damaged fleet pulled back, he heard Morrison's voice one last time. The human captain was actually laughing. He thanked the Veltar again for teaching them so much. He said his people were quick learners. Then he made a promise that still haunted Zexakari's dreams. The humans would learn everything the Veltar had to teach. Then they would teach the Veltar some things in return. In just 3 days, the humans had turned from helpless victims into dangerous enemies. They had studied Veltar technology, copied it, and improved it. Worst of all, they seemed to enjoy the challenge of fighting a superior force. Zexakari looked at the council members and saw fear in their eyes. They understood what his story meant. The humans had not just survived first contact with the galaxy's greatest military power. They had used it as a learning experience, and this was only the beginning of the nightmare that would follow. 5 years after first contact, Zexakari stood as one of the few surviving Veltar commanders. His crystalline body bore scars from countless battles, but the deepest wounds were in his mind. Around him in the Great Council chamber, representatives of 100 species waited to hear the conclusion of his testimony about humanity. The mighty Veltar hegemony no longer existed. Their fleet had been scattered, their worlds occupied, their technology absorbed by an enemy they had foolishly underestimated. President Ashley Turner now governed humanity from Earth, while Fleet Admiral Chris Martinez commanded ships that patrolled former Veltar space with casual confidence. The names on those ships told the story of human victory. Independence, defiance, retribution, liberty, perseverance, determination. Each vessel carried crews who treated impossible odds as routine challenges. They flew through space that had belonged to the galaxy's most feared military power, and they acted like they owned it, because now they did. Zexakari's voice broke as he revealed the most devastating truth of all. Analysis of captured human communications had shown that they were never fighting for survival. The entire war had been an opportunity for accelerated development. Humans had used the Veltar invasion as a training exercise. Dr. Nathan Ross published papers using Veltar tactical data to revolutionize human military doctrine. His research teams had studied every aspect of the war, treating battles like laboratory experiments. They analyzed alien psychology, technology, and biology with scientific precision that terrified their subjects. The humans had been taking notes the entire time. Every Veltar attack pattern was recorded and studied. Every alien weakness was cataloged and exploited. Every victory and defeat became data points in a vast research project aimed at understanding galactic warfare. Colonel Sam Wilson demonstrated the results when he raised the human flag over the former Veltar capital world. His ceremonies were broadcast across human space, showing their citizens that their species had gone from defending a single planet to conquering an interstellar empire in just 5 years. The transformation was impossible to comprehend. When the war began, humans struggled to reach nearby star systems. They had primitive weapons, small ships, and no experience fighting alien species. Now they possessed technology that surpassed civilizations thousands of years older. Dr. Amanda Clark led engineering teams that integrated captured alien systems with human innovations. Veltar plasma cannons were improved and mass-produced. Alien shield generators were analyzed and upgraded. Enemy communication systems were hacked and reprogrammed to serve human purposes. But the humans had not just stolen alien technology. They had understood it, improved it, and then moved beyond it. Their ships now carried weapons that used principles the Veltar had never discovered. Their defenses could stop attacks that would have destroyed entire alien fleets. The speed of this advancement defied every law of technological development. Civilizations normally took centuries to make major breakthroughs. Humans compressed this timeline into months or even weeks. They learned faster than any species in galactic history. Captain Jake Morrison, who had made first contact 5 years earlier, now commanded a fleet of ships that could have destroyed the original Veltar invasion force in minutes. His small exploration vessel had been replaced by a dreadnought bristling with weapons that combined human creativity with alien power. Morrison's transformation symbolized what had happened to his entire species. They had evolved from curious explorers into galactic conquerors through the simple process of studying their enemies and learning from their experiences. War had been their university, and they had graduated with honors. The psychological impact on surviving Veltar forces was complete and permanent. Soldiers who had once been the galaxy's most feared warriors now suffered from nightmares about human laughter during combat. They remembered human voices singing as their ships burned. They could not forget human commanders treating death as an acceptable cost of education. These survivors spread their terror throughout the galaxy. Every species with functioning intelligence networks had heard stories about human determination. Tales of impossible victories, creative tactics, and disturbing enthusiasm for warfare traveled from world to world like a plague of fear. Admiral Lisa Carter commanded human expeditionary forces that were mapping the galaxy's spiral arms. Her ships appeared in systems that had never seen aliens before, making contact with species that had lived in isolation for millennia. Each encounter followed the same pattern. The humans arrived with peaceful greetings and genuine curiosity about new civilizations. They asked questions about technology, culture, and military capabilities. They appeared friendly, eager to learn, and completely harmless. Then they departed with smiles and promises to return. Behind them, they left species that had inadvertently provided detailed information about their own strengths and weaknesses. The humans had learned everything they needed to know about potential enemies, while appearing to be nothing more than interested tourists. This was the new human way of warfare. They did not attack first anymore. They studied first. They understood their potential opponents better than those opponents understood themselves. Then, if conflict became necessary, they would win before the fighting even began. The galaxy's established powers were beginning to understand what Zexkari had tried to warn them about. Humanity was no longer a primitive species confined to a single world. They had become a galactic power with technology, tactics, and determination that surpassed their teachers. But the most frightening aspect of human expansion was their attitude toward it. They did not act like conquerors who had seized territory through violence. They acted like students who had graduated from an excellent school and were ready to apply their education. Engineer Ben Rodriguez led reconstruction efforts on former Veltar worlds, turning alien infrastructure into human facilities. His teams worked with efficiency that amazed local populations. They improved existing systems while integrating new technology that made everything work better. The humans were not destroying what they conquered. They were improving it. Veltar worlds under human control became more prosperous than they had been under Veltar rule. This approach convinced many alien populations that human occupation was preferable to their previous government. This was perhaps the cruelest irony of the entire war. The Veltar had invaded human space to acquire slaves and resources. Instead, they had provided humans with education and opportunity. Their attempted conquest had become a gift that allowed humanity to reach the stars. Zexkari's testimony ended with a warning that echoed through the council chamber like a funeral bell. The humans were no longer learning from the Veltar because there was nothing left to learn. They had absorbed everything useful from his people's technology, tactics, and psychology. Now they were looking for new teachers. Human exploration fleets were visiting every known civilization in the galaxy. They were making contact with species that possessed different technologies, unique military doctrines, and alternative approaches to warfare. Each encounter provided new lessons for human military scientists to study and apply. The galaxy had become a vast classroom where humans were the students and every other species was a potential instructor. The curriculum was warfare, and humans were eager to learn everything their teachers could show them. As Zexkari finished speaking, he looked at the faces around him and saw his own terror reflected back. Every species represented in the council had military secrets that could benefit human development. Every civilization possessed knowledge that human scientists would find valuable. The question was not whether humanity would come to their worlds. The question was how much they would learn when they arrived, and what they would do with that education once they had acquired it. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The fourth year of the war marked the moment when Zexkari truly understood that his people had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Kevin Barnes led human forces with a strategy he called adaptive escalation. Whatever level of force the Veltar used, humans would match it and then exceed it. When Veltar deployed their most advanced battleships, humans responded with modified freight haulers that somehow proved more effective. The cargo vessels had been stripped down and rebuilt with weapon systems that violated every principle of ship design. They should have been sitting targets for proper warships. Instead, these converted freighters destroyed Veltar battlecruisers with embarrassing ease. Engineer Rachel Stone had led the modifications, turning slow cargo ships into fast attack vessels. She removed everything non-essential and filled the empty space with guns and engines. The result looked like madness, but worked like genius. Veltar captains trained to fight proper military vessels had no idea how to deal with enemies that ignored all the rules of space combat. The humans had taken their weakness and turned it into strength. This pattern repeated everywhere Zexkari looked. Human disadvantages became advantages through pure creativity. Their lack of advanced technology forced them to be innovative. Their small population made every soldier valuable, so they trained each one to be worth 10 enemies. Their isolation from galactic civilization meant they had no preconceptions about how wars should be fought. The psychological impact on Veltar forces reached catastrophic levels during this period. Humans had lost 60% of their fleet in 3 years of fighting. Yet their offensive operations were increasing rather than decreasing.
Any rational enemy should have been suing for peace by now. Commander Paul Davis exemplified this impossible morale during the defense of Europa Station.
His force was outnumbered 5-1 by Veltar ships. His supply lines were cut. His reinforcements were weeks away. Davis not only held his position but launched attacks on nearby Veltar bases. His messages to Fleet Command were filled with jokes and casual conversation. He discussed the battle like it was a mildly interesting problem to solve. When his ammunition ran low, he started using debris as projectiles. When his shields failed, he used asteroids as cover. When his engines were damaged, he pretended his ship was disabled and then ambushed Veltar rescue teams. Davis held Europa Station for 8 months against overwhelming odds. His defense became a symbol of human determination that inspired their entire military. More importantly, it demonstrated to the galaxy that humans could not be broken by conventional warfare. Captain Julie Martinez proved this point again during her impossible defense of a single space station against an entire Veltar battle group. Her station had no military value. It was just a research facility studying asteroid mining. But Martinez refused to evacuate when Veltar ships arrived. Using nothing but modified mining equipment and pure determination, she held off attacks for 6 months. Her lasers were designed to cut rock, not penetrate military armor. But she found weak points in Veltar ship design that even their own engineers did not know existed. Martinez turned maintenance robots into combat units. She used the station's gravity generators as weapons. She even launched chunks of ore at enemy ships like primitive cannonballs. Everything became a tool of war in her hands. Her daily reports back to Earth read like comedy rather than military communications. She complained about the quality of enemy tactics. She criticized Veltar ship designs. She offered suggestions for how the aliens could improve their attack strategies. She was literally giving advice to the people trying to kill her. The Veltar battle group eventually gave up and moved to easier targets. A single human with outdated equipment had defeated a force that could have conquered small planets. Martinez celebrated by broadcasting music across all communication channels and inviting any nearby humans to join her for a party. But the true turning point came when humans revealed they had been studying Veltar biology for 2 years. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark had been collecting tissue samples, recording biological data, and analyzing alien physiology with scientific precision. The results appeared during the Battle of Proxima Station. Clark led an assault using weapons specifically designed to exploit Veltar weaknesses. Sonic devices tuned to their hearing frequency caused mass panic. Chemical agents that affected their nervous systems left them unable to coordinate. Light patterns that interfered with their vision made accurate shooting impossible. Zexkari watched in horror as 300 Veltar Marines fled from a dozen human soldiers. These were elite troops who had conquered worlds, running in terror from weapons that did no permanent damage. The humans had not just studied their technology and tactics. They had studied their bodies and minds. This battle marked the end of Veltar confidence. Their soldiers began to believe that humans had supernatural powers. How else could such a primitive species develop weapons that targeted the specific biology of every alien race they fought? The truth was worse than supernatural powers. Humans were just very good at science. They approached warfare like a research project. Every captured enemy provided data. Every battle revealed new information. Every defeat taught them something valuable about their opponents. Dr. Amanda Clark led research teams that analyzed everything from Veltar blood samples to their radio communications. She discovered that their hearing was more sensitive than human hearing, making them vulnerable to certain frequencies. She found that their eyes processed light differently, creating blind spots that humans could exploit. Most importantly, she learned that Veltar psychology was based on rigid hierarchies and predictable responses. They were brave when following orders from superiors, but became confused when forced to make independent decisions. Humans used this knowledge to target command structures and leave enemy forces leaderless and paralyzed. The war had become a laboratory where humans tested their theories about alien biology and psychology. Every species in the galaxy became a subject for study. Every encounter provided more data for human scientists to analyze. Zexkari realized that his people were not fighting a war anymore. They were participating in a scientific experiment where they were the test subjects and humans were the researchers. Every battle taught the humans something new about how to fight alien species more effectively. The most terrifying part was that humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Captain Sam Wilson led raids that were obviously dangerous but tactically unnecessary. His crews volunteered for suicide missions. His pilots requested assignment to the most dangerous combat zones. Wilson's forces suffered heavy casualties but maintained morale that defied explanation. They treated warfare like a sport where death was just another way to keep score. They competed to see who could destroy more enemy ships. They celebrated victories and analyzed defeats with equal enthusiasm. This attitude spread throughout human space. Civilian populations supported the war effort with enthusiasm that bordered on fanaticism. Factories worked around the clock to produce military equipment. Schools taught combat skills alongside traditional subjects. Children played war games that prepared them for real battles they might fight as adults. The entire human species had mobilized for total war, and they seemed to love every minute of it. Other species fought wars to achieve specific goals and then returned to peaceful pursuits. Humans appeared to fight wars because they enjoyed the challenge. By the end of the 4th year, Zexkari commanded a fleet that existed in name only. Most of his ships had been destroyed or captured. His surviving crews suffered from psychological trauma that made them unable to function in combat. The mighty Veltar military had been reduced to a collection of scared refugees hiding in the outer reaches of space. The humans were no longer defending themselves. They were expanding across former Veltar territory with fleets that combined captured alien technology with their own innovations. Ships bearing names like Independence and Retribution patrolled space that had been Veltar for centuries. The war was over in everything but name. By the 2nd year of the war, Zexkari had stopped sleeping well. The nightmares were always the same. Human faces laughing as their ships burned, human voices singing as they died. Human commanders treating impossible situations like interesting puzzles to solve. General Rick Thompson now led the human military, and he was nothing like any enemy commander Zexkari had ever faced. Thompson did not follow rules. He did not respect military tradition. His orders were often ignored by his own officers, and he seemed perfectly happy about this. The Veltar military worked on a simple principle. Commanders gave orders, and soldiers obeyed them. This system had conquered half the galaxy, but humans treated orders like suggestions. Every soldier thought like a commander. Every commander was willing to disobey orders if they saw a better opportunity. Captain Dana Rivers had proven this during the attack on Veltar Station 7. Thompson ordered her to provide support for the main assault. Instead, Rivers took her squadron on a completely different mission. She attacked the station's communication array while the main battle raged elsewhere. Thompson could have court-martialed her for disobedience. Instead, he praised her initiative. Rivers' attack had cut off Veltar reinforcements, turning a difficult victory into an easy one. The human military actually rewarded soldiers for thinking independently. This flexibility terrified Veltar commanders who had spent their careers following precise battle plans. How could you fight an enemy where every soldier might change the plan at any moment? How could you predict their moves when they did not know what they were going to do themselves? Sergeant Tony Miller had demonstrated this chaos during the boarding of a Veltar dreadnought. His squad was supposed to capture the engine room. Miller decided the bridge was a better target. He convinced the ship's crew that his team carried nuclear bombs, when they actually only had conventional explosives. The Veltar captain surrendered an entire dreadnought to 12 human Marines because Miller was a good liar, and the aliens were too scared to call his bluff. This kind of improvisation was impossible to plan for or defend against, but the worst part was how humans weaponized everything. They did not just use military equipment for war. Everything became a potential weapon in human hands. Lieutenant Maya Foster proved this when her destroyer was crippled during a raid on Veltar supply lines. Any other species would have abandoned the damaged ship and escaped in lifeboats. Foster had a different idea. She aimed her dying ship at a Veltar command vessel and used it as a guided missile. Her destroyer struck the alien ship at full speed, destroying both vessels and killing everyone aboard. Foster transmitted tactical data until the moment of impact. Her sacrifice provided information that helped humans win the next 3 battles. She had turned her own death into a weapon against the enemy. Asteroids became kinetic missiles in human hands. Damaged ships became decoys. Escape pods became spy devices. Humans looked at every object and asked the same question. How can we use this to kill our enemies? Their creativity was as frightening as their weapons. Captain Alex Turner specialized in psychological warfare that left Veltar survivors unable to function. His raids were carefully designed to capture high-ranking officers alive. These prisoners were not tortured or killed. Instead, they were given tours of human military facilities. The captured officers saw human factories producing ships faster than Veltar shipyards. They watched human engineers improving captured alien technology. They met human soldiers who treated death as an acceptable cost of victory. Then Turner would release them. These officers returned to their own forces as broken beings. They spread stories about human capabilities that were more damaging than any weapon. Fear became a virus that infected entire Veltar fleets. Ships would retreat from battles they could have won because their crews had heard too many stories about human determination. The humans began hacking into Veltar communication networks to broadcast footage of their victories. They wanted their enemies to see exactly what they were capable of. Videos showed human Marines capturing ships with nothing but small arms. Recordings revealed human pilots ramming their fighters into much larger alien vessels. Most disturbing were the images of humans celebrating their victories. They did not act like soldiers who had survived a terrible battle. They acted like athletes who had won an exciting game. Death and destruction seemed to energize them rather than traumatize them. Zexkari had watched one video dozens of times, trying to understand what he was seeing. Commander Paul Davis stood on the bridge of his flagship after destroying an entire Veltar squadron. His ship was badly damaged. Half his crew was dead. But Davis was smiling as he gave his after-action report. He talked about the battle like a teacher explaining a lesson to students. He praised the enemy tactics that had worked well. He criticized his own mistakes. He suggested improvements for future battles. There was no anger, no sadness, no fear. Just professional satisfaction at a job well done. This attitude was impossible for Veltar minds to process. War was supposed to be horrible. Victory was supposed to be relief that the horror had ended. Humans seemed to enjoy the horror itself. They treated combat like entertainment. Dr. Rachel Stone led teams of engineers who turned civilian infrastructure into military assets. Space elevators became mass drivers that could throw projectiles across entire star systems. Orbital habitats became fortress stations bristling with weapons. Mining colonies became missile bases. Everything humans built served dual purposes. A factory could produce civilian goods during peacetime and military equipment during war. A hospital could treat patients or serve as a command center. Even their schools taught subjects that had military applications. The line between civilian and military had completely disappeared in human space. Every citizen was a potential soldier. Every building was a potential fort. Every tool was a potential weapon. The entire human civilization had become a military machine disguised as a peaceful society. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark had shown how dangerous this approach could be. His research into Veltar biology led to the development of sonic weapons tuned specifically to alien physiology. These devices did not kill Veltar soldiers, but they caused overwhelming pain and panic. Clark used these weapons during the assault on Proxima Station. 300 Veltar Marines fled in terror from 12 human soldiers carrying nothing but sound generators. Warriors who had fought across the galaxy ran like frightened children from weapons that could not even scratch their armor. The psychological impact of sonic weapons was worse than their physical effects. Veltar soldiers began to fear that humans had developed specific weapons to target every alien species. The galaxy's most feared warriors started having nightmares about sounds that could drive them insane. As Zexkari finished describing the third year of the war, the council chamber had become completely silent. Every species represented there was imagining what it would be like to face an enemy that turned everything into a weapon and treated death as a learning experience. The worst part was yet to come. 3 months had passed since the first battle near Jupiter, and Zexkari felt his confidence crumbling like sand. What should have been a quick conquest had become a nightmare that grew worse each day. The human ships were everywhere now, and they were nothing like the primitive vessels his scouts had first reported. Admiral Lisa Carter commanded the human fleet now. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who seemed to understand Veltar tactics better than most Veltar commanders. Her ships moved in patterns that made no sense according to military doctrine, yet they won battle after battle. The worst part was watching his own technology turned against him. The humans had captured several Veltar ships in those early fights. Instead of just using them as they were, teams of human engineers took them apart piece by piece. A man named Ben Rodriguez led these teams, and he had done something impossible. The plasma cannons that took Veltar scientists 50 years to perfect, Rodriguez had improved in 3 weeks. His modifications made them 40% more efficient and twice as reliable. Even worse, every human ship received these improvements within days. The Veltar took months to distribute new technology across their fleet. Humans did it almost instantly. Zexkari had fought in hundreds of battles across the galaxy. He knew that defeated enemies usually stayed defeated. They would retreat, lick their wounds, and eventually surrender when the losses became too great. Humans were different. Every defeat made them stronger. Commander Amy Walsh had proven this during the defense of Luna Colony. Her small force was completely outnumbered by Veltar ships. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered or retreated. Walsh did neither. She fought a hopeless battle for 3 days, losing ship after ship. But even as her position crumbled, Walsh kept transmitting data. Her ships recorded every Veltar attack pattern, every weapon signature, every tactical decision. When her last ship was finally destroyed, she was still sending information back to Earth. The data stream continued until the very moment her ship exploded. 2 weeks later, the same Veltar tactics that had worked perfectly against Walsh failed completely against other human forces. The humans had studied their defeat like scientists studying an experiment. They had learned from failure better than most species learned from victory. This disturbed Zexkari more than he could express to the Council. The Veltar feared defeat because it meant weakness. Humans seemed to welcome it because it meant education. They treated warfare like a school where pain was the teacher, and death was the final exam. Colonel Steve Parker had made this philosophy into an art form. He led human forces that did things no military commander should do. His ships would broadcast their own positions to Veltar forces. They would announce their attack plans over open channels. They would even tell their enemies exactly when and where they planned to strike. At first, Zexkari thought this was madness or some kind of trap. He was right about the trap part. Parker was using Veltar predictability against them. When the aliens responded to obvious human tactics, they fell into carefully prepared ambushes. Their own military training became a weakness. Parker's psychological warfare was even worse than his tactical tricks. Human ships would play music during battles. They would joke with each other over open communication channels. Some human pilots would sing while fighting for their lives. This behavior terrified Veltar crews who expected enemies to show fear or anger, not joy. The humans also did something that no civilized species should do. They shared their victories with everyone. Every successful battle was recorded and broadcast across human space. But more disturbing was that they also shared their defeats. Failed tactics were analyzed publicly. Mistakes were discussed openly. Dead commanders were studied like textbooks. Zexkari remembered the Battle of the Asteroid Belt with particular horror. Admiral Kevin Barnes had led a human fleet into an obvious trap. 50 Veltar ships surrounded 20 human vessels. The outcome should have been certain, but Barnes had not come to win the battle. He had come to learn about Veltar fleet coordination. His ships fought desperately while recording everything. They transmitted constant data about Veltar command structures, communication protocols, and response times. Even as human ships died one by one, the information kept flowing back to Earth. The Veltar won the battle and destroyed the human fleet. But Barnes had achieved his real goal. Within a month, human forces were using new tactics based on what they had learned from their defeat. Veltar command networks, which had been secret for centuries, were now completely understood by human military planners. This was when Zexkari began to understand the true horror of fighting humans. They did not just adapt to enemy tactics. They actively sought out ways to lose battles in order to learn from the experience. Defeat was not something that happened to them. It was something they chose when it served their purposes. Captain Dana Rivers exemplified this approach during the siege of Titan Station. Her small squadron was supposed to hold the station against a massive Veltar assault. Instead, she abandoned her defensive positions and attacked the Veltar fleet directly. Her ships were destroyed within hours, but Rivers had not been trying to save Titan Station. She had been testing a new theory about Veltar shield harmonics. Her kamikaze attack provided crucial data that human scientists used to develop new weapons.
3 weeks later, these weapons broke through Veltar defenses that had been considered impenetrable. The most disturbing thing about human learning was its speed.
Traditional military thinking said that new technologies and tactics took years to develop and deploy. Humans compressed this timeline into weeks or even days. They would capture a Veltar ship on Monday and deploy improved versions of its technology by Friday. Sergeant Tony Miller had demonstrated this during a raid on a Veltar supply depot. His squad captured several intact weapon systems and a computer core full of tactical data. Instead of waiting for scientists to study these prizes, Miller's team began experimenting immediately. Within hours, they had figured out how to integrate Veltar targeting systems with human weapons. They used this knowledge to attack another Veltar facility, before the aliens even knew their depot had been raided. Speed of learning had become a weapon as powerful as any gun or bomb. As Zexkari continued his testimony, he saw the fear in the council members' eyes growing deeper. They were beginning to understand that humans did not fight wars the way other species did. Wars were not just conflicts to be won or lost. They were educational opportunities to be exploited. The scariest part was that the humans were just getting started.